Chicago's night was heavy with the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and refuses to let go. The neon lights that flickered on the windows of tall, gleaming skyscrapers painted the streets with fractured colors. The reds, blues, and greens dancing over the rain-soaked pavement like a cruel reminder of a world that had everything but lacked the ability to see those who truly needed it. Maya sat curled in the corner of a dark alleyway, wrapped in a tattered blanket that smelled of mildew and desperation. The chill cut through her thin jacket, and her hands were numb from the freezing wind that sliced through the city streets. She had been here before, countless times, each night blurring into the next. As much as she tried to find some comfort in the rhythm of the city's chaos, there was something about the stillness of it all that felt heavier than the pounding rain. Maya wasn't always here, wasn't always this girl. This woman who had long since abandoned any semblance of the girl who once dreamed of the world in brilliant technicolor. She was once full of ideas, full of ambitions, a young woman with stars in her eyes, dreams so big she could almost taste them, nearly convinced that everything she wanted was just a step away. But now, her eyes were different. They were tired. Dark circles hung under them like thick shadows, each one a scar from the nights she couldn't sleep, the days she couldn't stomach. Her once vibrant curly hair hung limp and tangled around her face, dripping from the rain that fell relentlessly. The streetlights above flickered above her head, casting fleeting shadows, but none of it illuminated the weight of what she had become. It had been 2 days since she last ate, 2 days since she last felt something close to human warmth. The street was filled with people who brushed past her, moving with the swift grace of people too busy to stop and care. Maya's heart sank a little more with each person who didn't even spare a glance. Every person who passed was a stark reminder of everything she had lost, everything she was trying to escape. They had their coats, their bags, their lives in motion, and she had nothing but the cold, the hunger, and the memory of a life that seemed like someone else's dream. She clutched an old bag she had found a few weeks ago, frayed at the edges. But it was hers. Inside were the few things she had left: a picture of her mother, a weathered journal with pages crumbling at the edges, and a few crumpled bills that barely amounted to anything. Those were her possessions now. They were reminders of who she used to be. She didn't need much, but she didn't have enough to survive either. A group of young adults passed by, laughing in that careless way that only the young and the hopeful could. They joked, they teased, they hugged one another, completely unaware of the woman watching them from the shadows. It wasn't jealousy. Maya had long since lost the taste for envy. But it was a pang of deep sorrow, a sense of having missed something, some crucial moment when life turned away from her and chose a different path. She couldn't pinpoint the exact moment when she had lost it all, but she knew for sure that the dreams she once carried were now buried beneath layers of shame, guilt, and brokenness. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her of her emptiness. There was nothing left to distract her, nothing but the cold air seeping into her body, reminding her that she was alive but barely hanging on. A piece of stale bread she had taken from the dumpster that morning was all she had. She swallowed it down quickly, her eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of kindness. The world around her moved at a dizzying pace, people rushing to get somewhere, unaware of the forgotten souls like Maya who existed in the city's shadows. To them, she was invisible, a part of the background noise that only existed to be ignored. She had been invisible for so long, so accustomed to being overlooked, that she wasn't sure if anyone would even care if she disappeared tomorrow. And yet, despite all of this, there was still a flicker of something within her, a tiny ember of hope that refused to die. It was the kind of hope that had been beaten down, weathered by time and hardship, but it was there, barely visible beneath the layers of despair. It was in the form of the girl she used to be, the one who once looked out at the world and believed in the possibility of change, of hope, of making something better of her life. But now, that girl felt like a stranger, someone who belonged to another time, another life. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. They were heavy, deliberate, and coming toward her. A man, His shoes clicked on the pavement, echoing through the street. He was walking in a hurry, a briefcase in hand, his posture stiff, his face set in a determined expression. He was a sharp contrast to Maya, well-dressed, the kind of man who had somewhere to be, something to do. As he walked past her, his eyes met hers for a brief moment. His gaze lingered for just a fraction of a second, and Maya felt it, something like recognition, but she couldn't place it. He didn't stop. He didn't even falter. He just moved on, like everyone else. And that, in itself, was a kind of cruelty. She had once dreamed of helping others. She had once dreamed of being the kind of person who could change the world. Now, she was the world's invisible woman. But something deep inside her, a flicker of her former self, told her that this wasn't the end. She had survived this long. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance left for her. But where would she go? How would she find the strength to change everything that had happened? She didn't know. What she did know, though, was that she couldn't stay here forever. She couldn't keep waiting in the shadows. Maya stood up slowly, wrapping her arms around herself for warmth. She knew she needed to find a way out. She had to. She had no other choice. The night was far from over, and her journey had only just begun. Maya's gaze shifted from the puddles at her feet to the rush of pedestrians streaming down the sidewalk. They were all moving too quickly, rushing toward destinations she could only dream of. Each person had somewhere to go, a purpose, a life to live. She envied them. She envied their certainty, their confidence in taking each step as if it led somewhere. Somewhere important, somewhere far beyond the cold concrete of her reality. The city, her city, a city that had once seemed so full of opportunity, was now just an endless blur of people and cars. The sound of high heels clicking on the pavement, the distant hum of taxis honking their way through traffic, the rapid shuffle of businessmen in dark suits talking into their phones. All of it was too much, too fast, too distant. It was all moving away from her, leaving her behind in the gutter where she had no choice but to watch, to wait, to survive. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. A few coins sat in her pocket, but she knew it wouldn't be enough for a meal. Maybe a coffee. Maybe not. Maybe she could get a piece of bread from the bakery if she was lucky. But even then, there was no guarantee. The food wasn't what she needed. Though, it wasn't the hunger in her body that hurt. It was the hunger in her soul. The gnawing ache that had been there for as long as she could remember, whispering to her that she was forgotten. Her fingers brushed the edges of the old, frayed bag she kept beside her. Inside, there were a few essentials. A half-dried notebook with scribbled thoughts from long ago. A set of pens she'd managed to hang on to after months of picking through trash bins. In another pocket, there was a picture of her mother, a woman with kind eyes and a wide smile that seemed to carry the warmth of sunlight. A woman who once promised her that life could be better than this, that there was always hope, even in the darkest corners of the world. But where was that hope now? What had happened to the promises her mother had made? When life had been simpler, it felt like a lifetime ago. Maya's eyes drifted toward the street. The neon lights from the nearby shops blinked in the misty night air, their colors flickering like broken promises. She could feel the wetness of the rain soaking through her clothes. But it didn't matter. It was as if her body had grown numb to the cold. The only thing that mattered now was that she could breathe, that she was still here, even though everything in her told her to give up. She looked across the street, watching as a man with a heavy coat walked past, his face illuminated briefly by the streetlight. He was so focused, so purposeful in his steps. It reminded her of something, a memory, maybe, a time when she used to walk like that, head held high, unaware of how the world might treat her. But now, every step felt like a struggle. Every moment felt like an effort to hold herself together, to not break apart. A honk from a taxi snapped her back into reality. It was just a regular night in the city. The same faces, the same rush, the same indifference. The only difference was her. She was here, sitting on the cold, unforgiving pavement, watching everyone else chase their dreams while she was stuck in an unending loop of survival. Her eyes scanned the street again, catching sight of a young couple laughing as they strolled by. holding hands. The woman wore a bright scarf. The man a leather jacket. They seemed so carefree, so alive with possibility. Maya's chest tightened as she watched them. They didn't notice her. Of course. But what? She was invisible to them, just like everyone else. She was just one more face in the crowd. One more lost soul, forgotten and passed over. Her fingers tightened around the straps of her bag, digging into the worn leather. She couldn't help but wonder how she had ended up here. How had she fallen so far, so fast? There was a time when she had dreams. Dreams that felt so real. She had wanted to become an artist, to paint murals on the sides of buildings, to tell stories with every stroke of the brush. She had been good, too really good. People had told her that, back when she still believed in herself. But that had been before the accident, before the world had come crashing down around her and left her with nothing but memories of better days. Now, all she could do was cling to the faded image of herself that still lived in her mind. She had once been someone with a future, with a plan, but now she was just a shadow, drifting in and out of the city's chaotic rhythm. Maya pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them as she huddled under the blanket, trying to make herself as small as possible. It felt like the world was pressing in on her from all sides, suffocating her with its indifference. She wanted to scream, to shout at the unfairness of it all. But what would be the point? No one would hear her. No one would care. A faint sound of footsteps approached her. Maya looked up, startled, and saw a woman standing in front of her. The woman was dressed in a coat that looked expensive. The kind of coat that people wore when they had places to be, when they had purpose in their lives. "Are you all right?" the woman asked, her voice soft, with a hint of concern. Maya swallowed, blinking up at her. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. She didn't want to speak, didn't want to explain her life to a stranger who would likely just turn and walk away. But the woman didn't move. She stood there, looking down at Maya with those eyes. Eyes that didn't look away in judgment. Eyes that didn't seem afraid. Eyes that saw her, truly saw her, in a way no one else had in a long time. Maya's heart beat a little faster. And for a brief moment, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still someone out there who cared. Could I help you with something?" the woman asked gently. Maya looked at her, unsure, her voice cracking as she spoke. I don't know," she murmured. "I'm just trying to survive." The woman didn't reply right away. She simply knelt down to Maya's level, her coat brushing the damp sidewalk, and asked, "What's your name?" "Maya," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The woman smiled. "Maya, it's nice to meet you. I'm Emily." Maya stared at her for a moment, confused. Why was this woman talking to her? Why was she helping? What did she want in return? But Emily didn't ask for anything. She simply sat there for a moment, her face kind and open, her eyes filled with something Maya hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. "You know," Emily said softly, "there's always a way out. Maya, you just have to trust that someone will help you find it." Maya didn't know how to respond. She had heard these words before, from others who had walked away, who had promised her a way out but had never returned. But Emily wasn't walking away. She was still here, and for the first time in what felt like forever. Maya felt like maybe she wasn't invisible after all. Maybe, just maybe, the world hadn't forgotten her. The rain had stopped, but the cold remained. The streets, though no longer wet with the downpour, seemed even more unforgiving under the pale glow of the streetlights. Maya sat huddled in her corner, wrapped in the blanket that had grown threadbare over time, her mind a fog of exhaustion and uncertainty. Yet, for the first time in what felt like ages, something shifted inside her. A spark, just the faintest glimmer of hope. She had seen them pass by before, people who seemed to live in a different world altogether. Well-dressed, well-fed, purposeful. Their lives seemed so foreign to her now, like a story she used to know but had forgotten. She had once been one of them, had once dreamed of living like them. But that was before the world had closed in, before her parents had died in that car crash, before everything she had known had crumbled away like dust in her hands. As the night deepened, and the crowds began to thin. Maya's tired eyes lifted again, this time to catch a glimpse of someone she hadn't noticed before. A woman, walking slowly past, her gait deliberate but graceful. She wore a long coat, a scarf wrapped around her neck, and had her head tilted down slightly, as if in thought. Something about her seemed familiar. Though Maya couldn't quite place it, the woman paused for a moment, glancing toward Maya. She hesitated. Maya felt a lump rise in her throat. She knew that look, the hesitation, the pity. It wasn't the first time someone had looked at her like that. People saw her. They noticed her, but they didn't want to get involved. They didn't want to help. "Are you okay?" the woman asked softly, her voice like a whisper against the noise of the city. Maya blinked, surprised. She wasn't sure what to say. She wasn't sure what to expect. This wasn't how it usually went. People either ignored her or yelled at her to leave. But this woman, there was something different. She seemed genuine. She seemed kind. I'm fine," Maya said, her voice cracking slightly as she fought to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. The woman didn't seem convinced. She crouched down next to Maya, her face softening with compassion. "Are you sure? You don't look fine," the woman said, her voice tender but firm. "It's cold out here, and you're alone. That can't be easy." Maya shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. The weight of the last few years, the pain, the loneliness, the feeling of being invisible to the world was too much. But the woman wasn't looking away. She wasn't judging. She wasn't pulling back. "I'm Lily," the woman said, offering a small smile. "I know we don't know each other, but you don't have to stay out here like this." Maya looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" She swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. "What do you want from me?" Lily paused for a moment before responding, her tone gentle but firm. "I don't want anything from you. I just want to help. You don't deserve to be out here alone. No one does." Maya stared at her, disbelief creeping into her thoughts. No one ever cared about her. No one ever gave a damn. Why would this stranger? Why now? What was she really after? Lily seemed to sense her hesitation. "You don't have to trust me if you don't want to," she said quietly. "But I can't leave you out here in the cold. There's a shelter nearby. You could stay for the night. At least get some rest. Some food." Maya felt something in her chest tighten. The shelter. It had been a long time since she had even considered going there. The idea of accepting charity made her feel weak, made her feel small. But Lily's eyes, full of kindness and sincerity, broke through the wall she had built around herself. For the first time in a long while, Maya felt something stir within her. A longing for safety, for warmth, for care, something human. "I can't," Maya whispered. "I don't know. I don't know how to trust anyone." Lily placed a gentle hand on Maya's arm, offering comfort without words. "You don't have to trust me right away," she said softly, "but at least let me help you tonight." The cold wind cut through Maya's coat, and for the first time, the chill felt unbearable. She knew she couldn't survive out here alone. Not tonight, maybe not ever again. But there was a small voice in her head urging her to take the chance, to let someone care for her, to take that first step out of the darkness. "Okay," Maya said, barely able to believe the words coming out of her mouth. "Okay, I'll go with you." Lily smiled and stood up, offering Maya her hand. Together, they walked toward the shelter, one step at a time. As they walked, Maya couldn't help but feel something shifting inside her. She didn't know what the future held, or how long this moment of kindness would last. But she knew one thing for certain. She didn't have to be invisible anymore. For the first time in a long while, someone saw her. And that was enough. For now.